Hi, everyone. It's your boy Zach, and I just finished watching Incredibles 2, and I'm so confused. I know this came out a little while ago, but I just started doing movies and TV shows, one video per day pretty much on this one. I was going to do yesterday, but I didn't like it enough to finish it. I think it took me like 2 days to finish this movie. Anyway, Incredibles 2 is obviously the sequel to Incredibles, but it had a 14-year gap, which is pretty crazy. I remember when I was in high school, Godfather 3 came out, and that was a big deal because it had been, something like 14, 15 years since the sequel. But they aged everyone up, and, time aged everyone up. Although I think Al Pacino was actually playing older than he was. I think he was like 40 something, and he was playing like a 60 something character. But whenever there's so much time between sequels, it just bothers me because it's just odd. It feels like there's this kind of like golden window of maybe like 2 to 5 years where if you don't have a sequel within that time frame, it's just weird. The Mission Impossible movies are actually speeding up. I think there was once a 6 year gap in between sequels, and then they just did three, and now it's about to be two, and then one. I believe they're gonna do shoot two at the same time. So anyway, the first Incredibles, when it first came out, I think I saw it on DVD. I don't think I saw it in the theaters, but Zaxxon was young. He's probably like three or so when it came out on DVD. And so, how you got young kids, they just watch DVDs over and over and over again. So, I like superheroes. So I was like, when it was in the theaters, I think I was like, whatever, Disney, whatever, who cares? But then when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is really good. It's like, how come all superhero movies aren't that good? Because remember, this is the period of like X-Men 2 United. Like super we hadn't quite gotten to, the Avengers and, the Marvel movies yet. So Incredibles, the first one was like it just seemed like it was from the future. I really liked it, and I watched it several times. And then as the years went by, I started to hate it. And it was mainly almost entirely because of one thing, and it was the family dynamic of constant arguing and screaming at each other. Now, I think in the writer director's head, Brad Bird, I think he was trying to do it's like, hey, families, right? They're all like this, right? No, no, no. If your family is like that, you need to be in group therapy or family therapy, and then you all need to be in individual therapy sessions, because that's a problem. You shouldn't always be screaming. Specifically, one of the things that I really just like bothers me is the arguing in front of the kids thing. That is a no go at this station, as we used to say in the Marines. I like the first one, like to watch it a couple dozen of times. Background. And then a couple years went by, and I really, really didn't like it. And then 10 more years went by, and they made the sequel. So I was like, oh God. And I wasn't going to see it, and I wasn't going to see it. And then I was like, oh, I'll check it out. And so here's what's interesting about Incredibles 2. It is both better and worse than the first one. There are multiple action scenes in this, and they are really, really good. It almost feels like the team was like, we did big superhero action before Marvel, did it. So let's show that we can kind of outdo them. And honestly, there were several scenes in here that were, I gotta keep using, like I keep wanting to say incredible. Very good. Great. The problem was they also really, really pumped up the family arguing thing, to which it was, I think they literally screamed almost every line. The other thing that was just weird is this isn't really an Incredibles movie. I would say 1/5 at the no, not even 1/5, like 1/10 at the beginning, and the last 25 minutes. So I guess it was like a third to a fourth of an Incredibles movie. Most of it was this Elastigirl movie, which is okay if you don't call it Incredibles 2. So it ended up becoming this weird combo of two different movies. One was, the Incredibles are still having problems they even said, there was a line, they're like, well, we all came together to, work out our group dynamic, family dynamic on the island, but that was this weird, supervillain fortress. Now we're back in, what is it called? Metropolisburg or something cutesy like that. Municiburg. Now we're back at home, so we're just trying to go back to how things were. That's a movie right there. But then it becomes this whole other thing of Elastigirl having like this, I don't know, it's almost like an affair or something like that. She basically dumps her family. It's all about her. It's all about her getting attention. And then she meets she becomes friend. So there's, I don't know, there's I forget these characters' name. It's a rich brother and sister. I don't know what the rich guy's name was. I'm just going to call the woman Wine Aunt. So they have this deal that happens in comics specifically, is where all female characters are instantly friends. So Wine Aunt, who is clearly the villain from like the first scene she is in. I even was kind of bored, so I just went to my buddy and I go, is Wine Aunt I didn't even finish the question. He goes, yeah, she's the villain. I go, so they made the most obvious person to be the villain? He goes, yeah. So the interesting thing is they kind of flipped the whole SJW mentality. Yes, the woman, the wife, is shown to be infinitely smarter, more courageous, more capable, more technically proficient. She can also fly attack helicopters in, basically among skyscrapers. Did they establish that she was the best pilot in the world in the first one? Because that one just kind of, and she's super good. She's super good at everything. And then they even established that even when she was parenting, she was the better. So they do this thing where so the family adjusting to what's our group dynamic now that we're back in Municiburg. That's one story. And then Elastigirl's the big hero and Mr. Incredible's taking care of the kids. That's a whole nother movie. So they mix back and forth. Here's the weird thing. Elastigirl is actually really cool when she's doing her superhero stuff. Like, a stretchy superhero has a lot of possibilities, and comics are kind of lazy about it. But man, she can do a lot of stuff. The problem is that she's not that interesting, And then they come up with this villain called the Screenslaver. Ugh. Okay, as a writer and an artiste, I gotta say that names for characters and stories are really hard. There's this slogan for EOD, the guys who defuse bombs. Well, technically, usually they just shoot a 50 caliber, or they put other bombs and they just blow up the bomb. But their motto is, I believe it's initial success or complete failure. That's how it is with names. Things are either kind of magically good from the beginning, or they're never right ever. That second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, name you come up with, it's never. If it's not like Screenslaver, really. Now, Screenslaver is a kind of interesting. She weaponizes screens and monitors, and basically hypnotizes people through them. But man, they really did not come up with a lot of time. I mean, there's this little inciting incident for the rich brother and sister, but it's not good. And at one point, she's just giving her speech, and it goes on forever. And it's just like, there's a lot of this, even though it was 14 years in between, the story really feels very first draft. It feels like it hasn't gone through. It's like, hey, you got two stories here, two completely different stories. Focus on one. It's like, Screenslaver? Really? Then they do this other weird thing where they introduce this like new group of heroes, and they're really SJW. Like, they got body diversity. They got the big Hulk. Oh, that's a girl. And they got an old guy. And they got, the motor mouth, neurotic, I'm so nervous person that's in like every single TV show right now. But then they quickly get ensorcelled and used to be the bad guys effectively of the movie. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So what I'm saying is, this seemed to be going in one direction of like, ha ha, the husband's stupid. Yay, women, we're all friends. And then they completely flipped that on its end. But then at the end, when it turns back into an Incredibles movie, there doesn't seem to be any like, oh, we've learned to work together, or we've learned to work out our dynamic in, Municiberg at home. It's just kind of like, oh, and we're back. Yeah, Jack Jack has powers. Ah. Also, Jack Jack having every single superpower while being entertaining really kind of broke it, because there was some really good scenes of them being very fearful of, Jack Jack being injured in the first one, and basically he's injury proof. There's also this thing where nobody wants to take care of them, which I found very off-putting when you're doing a family dynamic and like no one wants to take care of. And mind you, Jack Jack is like a baby. He's not like a toddler. No, he's walking, but he's like one of those precocious toddlers who starts walking at like 10 months. Like he's a okay. So as a parent, I would say first 6 months are like baby, like they can't sit up, they can't do anything. Then there's another 6 months where they're like a baby, and then once they're like 1 year old, that's like toddler. I've heard toddler is after 2 years. Not really a baby at when you're one. But I'd say he's like 10 months. This is still like the point where everyone's like, oh, I get to watch the baby. Like no one wants to watch the baby. He's literally a football. No, it's hot potato. Everyone just wants to get rid of him. So I found that kind of off-putting and weird. Overall, it was, I don't know. I liked parts of it a lot, and I hated other parts. I would rather have watched it than have not watched it. But when there's 14 years go by and so many things have changed, I almost think like it would have been better just to do a soft reboot, and just say, hey, we're setting it in the modern day. Oh, that's the other thing. So I was a 3D animator really briefly, actually. I was in the occupation for less time than I was in school to learn it. But the first Incredibles really holds up. And this one was weird. For instance, at some points they go into a city and it's just like this regular generic city. It's like the city in the Spider-Man PlayStation 4 video game. You're like, this is just generic city. And then when they're in these mansions in the countryside, it's, super, 1950s aesthetic. And then at one point, Elastigirl goes into like this tenement and it's almost photorealistic. It's weird. It's like the art direction was all over the place. There was like, and then also like the 3D models, for instance, Frozone, Elastigirl, and Violet, they all look almost exactly the same. But Mr. Incredible is quite different. And they changed, I forget, Dash. He's like in the middle. Like he's like a 50% change. So it was very weird. Like keep everything, all of the worlds matched in the first. Everything matched. You know what I mean? But this one, it almost felt they're like some other movie got like canceled at the last minute. And they're like, we got this very, very, very detailed tenement, 3D model. I mean, we spent like $300,000 on this thing. And they're like, we do have, okay, yeah, just put it into the Incredibles movie. It didn't match. I mean, there's some cool stuff. There's like this really cool hydrofoil and a plane that comes out of the top of it in the final, big scene. And that was really cool. And then in the middle, these attack helicopters come out of nowhere. And they really do feel like they went to, I forget the names of these websites, but when I was in animation, there's all these websites where you can buy a 3D model. It's always like some guy in the Ukraine, and he'll sell it for cheap. Usually it means he kind of stole it from someone else and changed it and added some new shaders. But it actually felt like 3D assets bought on, off a website. You're like, what? This doesn't match. And then the Screenslaver is like, the Screenslaver seemed like a one episode villain from Batman the Animated Series. Like the name was whack. The design was really lame. I mean, Syndrome was kind of silly looking. He almost looked like a Dr. Seuss character, but he was very memorable. I bet most people, if you haven't seen the movie for 14 years, you can probably draw him from memory. Screenslaver was a black bodysuit and goggles. And then later she had kind of a supervillain, which was just like some kind of Lululemon sports gear. Like, okay. But overall, watch it for free if you haven't already seen it. As far as them doing another one, no. I wish they wouldn't have done a sequel. I mean, Incredibles 1 is basically a perfect movie. And this is very far from perfect. Oh, I'm hungry. Sorry about the stomach growling. I'm fasting. Anyway, thanks for watching. Subscribe, and I'll have another. I'm gonna do. Somebody told me that the latest. I'm just gonna bebop around from superhero or sci-fi type of stuff. So somebody told me the latest this week's episode of The Flash is really good, and I think that I saw an advertisement for the latest episode of The Arrow, and that actually looked pretty good too. So tell me if I should do one of each, but I'm gonna do the latest episode of The Flash. I watched like every episode from the first 3 seasons, and then I just kind of trailed off. I don't even know what season they're in, 5 or 6 right now. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.